intro and
Yeah, sounds good.
and hand over to you.
All right, not a problem.
It looks like we're recording. Awesome. So, welcome everyone to the December 2019 meeting for the Australian DevOps, the Australia and New Zealand PowerShell and DevOps user group. Today we've got Jeff Truman talking about interacting with Azure DevOps from the command line. It's a it's a topic I'm personally very interested in, and I think it'll be interesting for most of us, if not all of us. So, Jeff, you're already sharing, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I really appreciate you reaching out. I'm excited to be here. So, my name is Jeff Truman. I've taken the certification, so the AZ400. So I guess according to Microsoft, I'm an Azure DevOps expert. I just about I think it's 6 months ago now, I finished working at a company in Orlando. I worked there for about 3 years as a traveling consultant, and the travel just got a little too much. So now I'm working as an Azure DevOps architect for a company up in Philadelphia. And so we are in the midst of a huge project to migrate a bunch of line of business applications from on-premise up into cloud. So it's been challenging, but a lot of fun. So, but yeah, let's dig into this. So one of the things I was going to let you guys know right away is this is going to be very interactive, and it's also kind of going to be more on the fly than you're probably used to. So I would assume, it's not going to be death by slides. There's definitely going to be quite a bit of demos, and it won't take me the whole hour. So once I'm done kind of talking about what I wanted to share with you guys, I'm definitely going to open it up for questions, and it'll be kind of an AMA, ask me anything about Azure DevOps, PowerShell, whatever you want to talk about. So I think that could be pretty effective. Plus, it's really early here. So here we go. So interacting with Azure DevOps from the command line, right? So one of the things that I'm getting more and more into as I deal with Azure DevOps is you can do a ton of stuff from the front end, right, from the web interface. But if you get into some pretty advanced situations, like actually I'm in at work right now, we get into a situation where we need to do something very specific, and we need to trigger different things inside of Azure DevOps. And when you're doing that, sometimes the built-in functionality just isn't there. Thankfully, with Azure DevOps, they've done quite a bit of work with the marketplace, where there's a bunch of extensions that you can install potentially if you need to, and a lot of kind of community developers have done some work to help you out. That's really powerful, and we use those a ton too. But again, we're getting into a situation now where some of the stuff just isn't quite where it should be. So I'll jump into my next slide. This was supposed to be a joke slide. I thought last night this was going to be hilarious. But yeah, like I said, I don't have many slides. That's about it. So and I'm going to share these out when I'm done. But here's what we got. So I'm going to give credit where credit's due for some of this stuff. The top one's going to be the PowerShell modules that I'm going to show real quick. One of the things I wanted to talk about first was for PowerShell modules interacting with Azure DevOps, there aren't really any official ones, which is kind of odd. There's really good documentation on the API, but there's not a lot of kind of Microsoft provided PowerShell modules. So because of that, if you look in the PowerShell gallery, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here in a second, there's a lot of different modules, and they all kind of cover different things. A lot of it's around build and release, but it's a lot of kind of all over the place. So you kind of have to dig through a little bit. This is a good one that I found, this Posh Azure DevOps. It's got a pretty good selection of different commands that you can run. So I'll show you that. But then the next thing that we're going to talk about is actually interacting with Azure DevOps from PowerShell is actually going to be a quick code snippet that I found through this GitHub. And it's really powerful in that it kind of gives you the framework that you can drop in any of the API calls and then start to interact with it from the command line that way to see what you're getting back, and then start to consume some of that JSON document that comes back and start to do some pretty advanced stuff. And then at the bottom, I've just got the link for the actual REST API calls for Azure DevOps. Any questions before we jump in? Literally, that's all the slides I got. All right, cool. So let me jump over to, give me 1 second here, and let me show you this first. So as I said, PowerShell Gallery, Azure DevOps, right? So if we're doing PowerShell Gallery and matching DevOps, like I said, you're not going to see a ton on here that say specifically that they're from Microsoft. It's a lot of kind of different stuff. The one that I mentioned earlier was Azure DevOps, and that's the one that I've been kind of using the most to kind of kick around. But like I said, if you dig into each one of these different ones, sometimes there's build helpers, there's VS Team, which is kind of an older one. Just check for how, the way that I do this is when I come in here and I'm looking for a specific set of commandlets, relevance is important, but honestly, I go by most recent, because those are the ones that are most recently have been updated. And you can also check how many times they've been downloaded, things like that. So the one that I grabbed was actually this one, Azure.DevOps, just because when I drilled into it and I started to look at some of the actual package details and stuff, it looked like it had some of the actual, like, find build, add build folder. Why is it doing that? So it had some better information, or some better commands about what I was kind of looking to do. So, and then here on PowerShell Gallery, it tells you exactly how, and I'm sure you guys know this, how to install that module. So let me fire up, let me pull in my PowerShell window here quick. Oh, you know what? You're going to get a screen for a second. I gotta authenticate. Just got to run as admin. Of course, it's going to be a pain. Stand by. There we go. All right, so let me drag this across so you guys can see what I'm seeing. And it's a pretty little red screen. There we go. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to obviously, and like I said, this is going to be very on the fly, get module to show you what I've got, which is hardly anything. And then let's just, this is normally how I would do this. So let's install this module. So let's go out here and grab that module. Come back to my PowerShell window, come back, my PowerShell window. There we go. We'll pull that in real quick. All right, now let's run the same command again to make sure it's there. And why did it not pull in? Because it's gonna be the demo gods this morning. Allow clutter and force. Stand by. List available. Come on, laptop, wake up. Wow, there we go. Yeah, there's a few. All right, well, import dash module. Sorry, give me 1 second. This doesn't start being nice. I'll just move on. There we go. Okay. So here's our DevOps command. So what it allows us to do is to use some of these commands to do like get Azure DevOps build and build ID and things like that. So what we can do is get Azure Dev. Let's get our Azure DevOps build. So the first thing we're going to need to do is grab our URL. So let me grab that over here. Give me 1 second. So HTTPS. Ta-da. All right. That's not going to work. I'm going to need to rerun this. Sorry. Collection project. What is it doing? Let me rerun that. Sorry. Give me 1 second. Get DevOps. Say again? Oh, yeah. I absolutely will make the text bigger. Sorry about that. I can blow this up, and then I will make that text bigger. Oh, come back. Did that just close on me? That's awesome. All right. Then tell you what, I'll do it, even though that was kind of clunky. I'll do that through ISE because then I can more easily make the text bigger. Sorry. Give me 1 second. Yeah, let's do this way. Thanks for hanging with me here. Give me 1 second. Pull this over. Get over there. Ta-da! There we go. Clean this up. Go away. I don't really need my other window yet. Get rid of that. There we go. And then I can jack this up a bit. How's that? Better? All right. So import dash module. Paste. Oh, and of course, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so get dash commands. This is what I was doing earlier. Azure IDD dash module. Azure.DevOps. Yeah. Get command, not commands, Jeff. There we go. So we're gonna get dash Azure DevOps build. And then actually this is helpful too because now I know what they want. So they want the URL, the collection, the project, and the build ID. Okay. So let's do URL is this. Well, that's always going to be dev.azure.com. Collection. So based on this, because they're doing URL and collection, you could actually use this on TFS on-prem as well. I mean, really, once you're in Azure DevOps, you only get one collection unless you do a whole lot of other stuff. And then your project is on it. And then we need a build ID too. And just so you might not know where to get your build ID. So let me show you that quick. So let's go back over here and let me pull over this guy. So here's my actual Azure DevOps, right? And so let me pull this back. So this is the project that I'm working in. It's called OnRamp. So once I'm in here, I'll go into my pipelines, which is not something that I enjoy that they call it now, but I know why. So this used to be called pipelines, and then in here you'd have builds and releases. Now they're calling it pipelines. The reason that they're calling this pipelines is because we're trending toward going to YAML as the definition for our pipelines. And when that happens, we won't have releases anymore because the build and the release will be one object that will sit inside of the pipeline, and it will be described in code. So I'm not saying that it's going to go there immediately, and it'll probably even take it a couple of years to fully go that way. But if you want to do yourself a favor in doing Azure DevOps, start to look at YAML. Honestly, it's something I need to do too. I've done a ton of this stuff, and mostly it's been through the designer, which I'm kind of showing right now. But one little tip that you take away from today, not only working with the command line, but also start looking at YAML as a way of describing your pipelines. The nice thing is, as well, is just like infrastructure as code, you can then check your pipelines into source control. So not only will your code be in source control, but your pipelines will be as well. So you'll be able to version control your pipelines, which is kind of interesting. Anyways, let's jump back in here. So if we're jumping into pipelines, here's all of our builds. Let's just grab one. It really doesn't matter which one. Sure, that one, it don't matter. So our build ID is going to be 318. So that's all we really needed out of there. So up here in the URL, you'll see the build definition ID is 318. So let's just grab that and we'll say build definition is 318. Let's not mess this up. Hit enter.
The only place to get that value from the URL, you just got to like pull it out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. You really kind of have to just pull it out. And so here's what we got. So it did our Azure DevOps sign in, right? And it did SSO, so it dumped us in. And then here's the result that we got. And it's not pretty. This is kind of the way that this works when you get output out of any of these commandlets. Or is this one telling me that it might be telling me that I'm not authenticated. But anyways, this is a lot of what you get back. You get back kind of HTML or kind of weirdness. So let me show you the other way of doing this. It's just as effective. Because the one thing that I like some of these commands, but the one thing that they don't tell you very easily, and I don't think, so let me clear that up one more time. I don't think, oh, there was a PAT. Okay, let me grab my PAT token. That's what it was missing. Okay. Does everybody know what a PAT token is? I'm sure you guys do in Azure DevOps. Personal access token. So it's the way that you authenticate a lot of times right now. There we go. Let's run that. Why? Found type key, blah, 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 error code. Why did it not like that? Hold on. It wants single quotes? What did I do wrong? It should have worked. Anyways, all right. I'll clean that up and send you guys the correct command. I don't want to waste a bunch of time showing you a bunch of red text. So let me show you what all of these modules are really doing behind the scenes, because that's going to be this is kind of like, showing somebody how to run a command is pretty dead simple, right? So you guys probably know how to go out to the marketplace, grab some commandlets and run it. That's kind of PowerShell easy stuff. So let me show you some of so if we jump into code instead, here's what these things are realistically doing behind the scenes. So what they're doing is it's just wrapping an API call and giving you a friendly result. So the issue that I'm running into right now at work is we have a situation where we're using VM scale sets for reasons and security and all kinds of reasons and things. So because we're kind of doing a lift and shift mentality right now, we didn't want to rev a bunch of our code in a way that would allow easy running on platform as a services, because we're going to spend that time containerizing the apps. So that's kind of the reason. So because of that, we're using VM scale sets. When we're using the VM scale sets, we did ARM templates for everything, which makes a lot of sense. That's kind of industry standard. You want to use an ARM template. The one difficulty with an ARM template and VM scale sets is that when you create that scale set, it works very well, and we use Azure DevOps to actually create that scale set and drop the code on there, and actually that could be really effective. Let me jump over here and show you guys. Go back to my other screen. So let me just jump into the release and show you what one of our releases looks like. So here's our partner API. So if I jump into this, it's just a series of tasks, so there's nothing really proprietary here. So we have a number of artifacts, right? This is what our pipeline looks like. So here's all our built artifacts that we're going to dump into these servers. If we jump in here, what we're doing first is a template validation, right? So we're calling out to, I've got some of this stuff disabled because I was testing some things, but we do some Azure blob storage stuff first, where we store some files out on Azure Blob Storage, because it's more effective to pull those back into the VM skill set that way during the build. For the purposes of this and for security purposes, we dump them out there, we run a couple of scripts, and then we actually call out to a key vault to get the secrets that we're going to use inside of our pipeline. So all of our secrets are stored in all of our secrets are stored in Azure DevOps key vaults. And that way they're not floating around in configuration files and stuff like that. So that's very effective too. So the first thing that we're doing currently in the lower environments, anytime that we run a release, is we just delete everything. So all of our environments, every resource group is refreshed every time that we release to it. So we're completely deleting and deleting all of the deployment group targets as well. So that's an important part. When we're doing these deployments, we're actually creating deployment groups on the fly. So as these virtual machine skill sets are brought online, each node registers itself back into Azure DevOps as a deployment group agent. And that way, when we go to deploy to it, we're always deploying to that fresh batch of servers, which is pretty effective. We found that works really well. So as I said, down here, when we're doing the actual build, we're jumping out to the key vault again, getting our new secrets. And then based on this one, we're getting a SAS token, or actually it's this one. We run this PowerShell script that generates a SAS key to our storage location that we talked about earlier, and pulls down the file, or gives us access to the files that we need to actually build these VM skill sets. Then we build the actual infrastructure. So this is actually running the actual ARM template. And then we enable some load balancer diagnostics and things like that. And the reason that we have this delete offline deployment group targets here is when you're building VM skill sets, one of the options you can enable is something called over provisioning. So let's say you need three VMs. Microsoft has realized that sometimes one of the deployments will just take longer than it needs to for some reason. So what they've allowed through the system is something called over provisioning, where it'll actually spin up 5. And the first 3 that are done are the ones that it marks healthy, and the other 2 are marked unhealthy, and then those can be deleted off. So they're trying to get you as quickly as possible to the number of VMs in your skill set that you want. So it's kind of the same way it does it inside of Kubernetes and other things like that. They spin up all kinds of stuff, and then they just spin down the ones that they don't need, because sometimes sometimes the nodes take longer than others for some reason because of the host that they're on or whatever it is. So they just allow the system to kind of figure it out. So anyways, we have to delete off the ones that we don't need, and then we do some test deployments, and then we actually start pushing code. And this is all kind of old school pushing, creating IIS sites and app pools and stuff like that a lot of times you don't have to do currently in a lot of the PaaS services. So that's kind of what our pipeline looks like, and it works out pretty well. But sometimes these deployments take, based on size of code, and we also have some, this one doesn't have it in here, but we, oh yeah, it's right here. Sometimes we have these database deployments as well. So sometimes these pipelines can take 2 hours, easy to run, which is clunky, but we're working to make that faster. So all that being said, the reason that we're running into an issue right now is VM scale sets. We want them to scale, right? So that's the beauty of a scale set. You have 3 nodes, they get really busy. We want to bump it up to 5. One of the things we realized was we were actually scaling during some security patching and stuff at night, even in dev. So we had 3 nodes, it was scaling to 5, and then it would scale to 7, and then it would scale to 9. And we're like, why does this keep scaling? And we had very specific counters looking at the application. And what we finally realized was when it scales, it reruns the ARM template, right? But that's all it reruns. It just reruns the ARM template. So it's building the infrastructure, but we're good Azure DevOps engineers, so we were using Azure DevOps to push the code down here. So it's running just that. It's running just the build our infrastructure piece, and then yeah, it runs just the build infrastructure piece. So it registers additional deployment group targets, so that works. But the reason it kept scaling out further and further is because it was creating new nodes, but it was not pushing code to the node. So because of that, the application just stayed busy, and it would report back to Azure, I still need more help, and it would spin up more. And so it was basically bringing new team members on the team, but never training them. They didn't have code. They just sit there and stare at you and say, why are you busy? So it was terrible. So what we worked through late last week was we needed a way for the ARM template to actually call Azure DevOps through the API and kick off a code-only deployment. So that's one of the things we're kind of putting together right now. So as that ARM template kicks off, it's actually going to build the infrastructure, and then the template itself will call back to Azure DevOps and say, okay, now that I've built this new machine, I need you to put code on it. The alternative to that, when we talk to Microsoft, is, oh, if you're using a VM scale set, the best way to do it is just use this image deployment technology that we have, shared image gallery, and you need to take your base image of Windows 2016 or whatever you're using, and then inject your code, and then build a new custom image, and that's what you point your ARM template to. So that way, anytime that the template runs, it already has the code on it. The disadvantage there is we have like 30 different machine types with the different applications that we're running because of the different types of line of business. So it would be, we'd have to use Packer or something, some kind of technology like that to try to inject code on the fly, and it would be very clunky and very time consuming. Any time that a new code deployment would happen, we'd have to repackage the entire OS. And in talking to them, they said that this would be a very slick way of doing it to kind of inject stuff on the fly through Azure DevOps. So let me get back to what I was showing you. So if I go back into code, here's what we're doing. So we did some research back. Let me jump back into this, and I know I'm kind of jumping around, but I wanted to show you what I'm doing. So this is the link that I shared on that first slide. So this is if you just Google Azure DevOps REST API, you get this documentation, and this is every API in the system, all broken out. So right now I'm sitting inside of definitions, inside of definitions of a release. So I'm inside of the release. So you can look at any one of these: artifacts, audit, build, core, dashboards, Git, whatever you want to look at, right? And there's REST APIs for all of it, because when you're clicking around in the front UI, what you're really calling is just APIs. They're giving you the information back, right? So here we've got release definitions, and I'm going to run a Git command, right? So that would be essentially what we're doing to get some information about the specific release that we're talking about. So if I go back to VS Code again, so here's the way that this flows out. And again, on that first slide that I showed you guys, I jumped into this. This is Posh GitHub. The other link I had was this one. Let me click that link for you and show you which one I'm talking about. So this is the demo that I pulled from, and he has a function, but I just pulled out the interesting bits of it. But here you can get, he's got you a list of release definitions and a list of projects. Of course, he doesn't have his personal access token. He's, cleaned it up a bit, but this is basically the bones of the script that I'm about to show you kind of right here, where it gives you your URL and then tells you how to write your PAT token into a way that allows you to authenticate. So basically here is the request URI, and in this one what we're doing is I'm looking at APIs, I'm looking at a release, so you can tell kind of in this part of the API call right here what I'm looking at. APIs, then release, then deployments. I'm giving it a specific definition ID. I'm also going to give it a specific environment ID, and what that is the stage in that release, right? So you've got dev, QA, UAT, that kind of stuff in the same pipeline. That's how you can specify that. And unfortunately, again, you're kind of going to have to bounce back and forth between the front end UI and back here, because really the easiest way to get these IDs, you could run an additional query to get the ID. But if you're building out this query string, just go over there and look at your URI in the top of your browser, and you'll be able to see these IDs. So I'm getting a definition ID, and then I'm getting a deployment status succeeded. So let me show you what I'm doing there. So if I jump back over here and the other one in here, right? So if I jump into my release we talked about earlier, and this guy, I'm looking for a specific deployment ID. So what that is inside of my deployment group. And I talked about these deployment groups earlier. This is how we keep track of what servers we're going to deploy to. And as you can see here, they're very generic names because they're going to scale up and scale down. But here's what I was talking. So this succeeded thing right here, tells me that I've successfully pushed code to this node before. If I had scaled up my VM skill set, I would have additional nodes down here and they would say never deployed. So if I go back here, again, what I'm saying is give me my deployments, give me my release, my deployment definition, then give me all of the nodes that I've successfully deployed to, but also give me the latest attempt only. So I only want to know, basically going back, I'm basically trying to drill down to which release took place on these nodes. So I want to know that it was release 25. So let me show you what this looks like. So we've got our request kind of built out. We've got our PAT token that I just generated from the front end. And then what this does is you need to initialize your authentication context. So basically what it does is it takes this PAT token and it converts it to a base64 string. And then it passes it through as a header in your request. So if we grab these first couple of lines and hit F8, it does a thing, right? So now we're actually going to generate our result. So let's rip that quick. Okay, now we've got our result. Let me show you what the result looks like. So if we do result, hit enter, that's what we get back. A very API response, right? So you get a status code, you get a description, you get content, which is where your real meat and potatoes is, and then some other stuff that you can dig through if you choose to, right? So the real meat and potatoes, like I said, is your result content. So let's dig into that. Now, here's what you get back. It's a whole lot of stuff, right? And it's not formatted well, and it's just information. So what do you do then? And it's just a big fat string. So right now, if I show you guys the way that I started to dig through this is okay, I get a bunch of stuff back. So give me my result.content. I need to know what that is. So let me just get member on that and scroll back up, and it's a string. The API documentation says it returns a JSON object, and it does. This is formatted in JSON context, but they return it as a string because it's HTML. So the next thing we needed to do is give our result.content, and I know this seems kind of backwards, but we're going to convert from JSON into a variable, which basically takes the JSON and converts it into an object in PowerShell so that we can actually deal with it. So when we do that, we now get $pool, not down there, not up there, down here. So then we get $pool. So now we know that we have 6 objects, and the objects are inside value. Does that make sense? So now if I do pool and I do a get member, now I've got a custom PS object that was built for me from the JSON that we returned from Azure DevOps. So this can get very powerful very quickly. So now you're creating very rich, very robust objects that you can start to manipulate right from Azure DevOps itself, right? So now we have 6 objects because that's the number of releases that were in that whole big list. So now if I want to deal with just the first one, I could iterate through an array. I can do whatever I want, but just for showing you what it looks like, let me jump in. Here's the first one. So I just did pool value. Just give me the first one. So what we've got here is we've got an additional ID, and our release is release name 25. Remember in that other page I was showing you guys, release 25 is right there. So that allowed me to dig down to the specific release that I needed. So if I jump back over here, I've got that one. I've got a full URL that gives me that information, and then it even gives me a artifacts object I could drill into, web access URI, all kinds of fun stuff, right? It tells me which specific release definition is tied to that specific release, that it succeeded, who it was requested by, who it was requested for, what time it was queued on, all kinds of stuff. So this really gives you some kind of under the covers access into some of the things that you'll need at times. One of the other things that I did in my previous company was we got into a situation similar to this where I needed to basically chain releases together, and I can add that to the show notes or whatever we want to call them to my slide, but there's a blog post out there on it from my old company Nebbia. But basically I needed to chain releases. So I needed to do one release, and then at the end of that release, have it kick off the next release. And at that time, you could chain builds, but you couldn't chain releases. So one of the things I had to do was the last step in the first release was a PowerShell script that called the API like this and got the next release definition and created a new release for that second definition and passed parameters through. Now, I'm pretty sure, I think it was at Ignite this year, they announced, or maybe it was a little before that, they announced that they've made that generally available. And in the UI now, you can chain releases if you need to. I'm pretty sure that's there. But so it's sometimes weird situations where you have to do that because, you know, you can't put all of the steps in one release because it's not always going to happen. So it basically allowed us to conditionally release something. So if all of this was true, we could do a quick PowerShell script that says, if all of those things is true, then release the second part. If any one of those things wasn't true, then don't release the second part, is basically what we're doing. It was conditional release statements. So anyways, I've been talking for like 40 minutes. That's the basis of what I wanted to show you guys. I have another chunk of the script, but it was just basically pulling up a specific deployment ID. And it's very similar to the same script. And what this one gives you back instead was, it was very specific. It was telling you the deployment targets of that same deployment that have never been deployed. And I got back 0, right? Because if we go back here, there aren't any that haven't been deployed yet. So does that make sense? Hopefully. I would love to open it up since it's like I said, I've been talking for about 45 minutes. I would love to open it up for any questions, and we can drill into anything that you guys want to talk about. Like I said, it can be in reference to what I'm talking about here, or really anything PowerShell DevOps. I definitely want to open it up and give you guys some time to chat. So. And I needed a drink. Hey.
How are you liking the multi-stage pipelines in general?
Multi-stage pipelines. Go ahead.
Like the YAML.
Yeah.
Pipelines.
So we're really trying to adopt them as quickly as possible, but there's definitely some stuff in there that isn't quite as robust as we need it to be yet. So the multi-stage pipelines was literally just, I think, announced at Ignite for the release side of things. They've had multi-stage YAML for builds for a while. So we're getting there. I know that's something that they're definitely putting a lot of work into. And it's going to, I think it will be the way that they're going to do stuff in the future, like I said. So it's definitely something to start kind of looking at. I don't know that I've kind of cautioned my team that while I want to start looking at it, I also don't want to run it as like production yet, because it's still at times a little buggy. I don't want to really say buggy. It's just sometimes I feel like maybe it's 90% of the time it's probably me. I don't fully understand how it needs to be flowed out exactly, and the designer's just easier a lot of times. The nice thing is too, if you've seen it in Azure DevOps, you can use the YAML designer. So you can grab the tasks that you're used to and drop them onto the template, and it actually creates kind of the YAML for you, and then you just clean it up. So that can be pretty effective too, just to kind of get your feet wet in what the YAML will look like. So yeah,
I've just been playing with them again. Well, today.
Yeah,
and it's better than when I first tried it, like when it first came out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's really interesting seeing. So my use of DevOps, Azure DevOps, has been for basically my PowerShell scripts, my modules, and just moving my code around and testing it and build. It's interesting seeing sort of it being used as slightly bigger, well, at a much bigger scale.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Like I said, in my previous company, I did 3 years of traveling consulting, and I did a ton of actual migrations from TFS to Azure DevOps. And because of that, I got my feet very wet very quickly on builds and releases and doing some pretty complex stuff. I think I did around 150 of those migrations or so in 3 years. So there was a ton of them. Getting people off of TFS on-prem, which was pretty powerful for them just to kind of get the new tools in their hands. And sometimes I'd be walking into shops that are trying to do .NET Core, and they're still using TFS like 2017, and I'm like, oh, let me show you how much easier this could be. So I really like Azure DevOps. I mean, I've used in my career, I've used some of the other products, Jenkins and things like that. And there's some really good tools out there, but as far as kind of one-stop shop to get it all done in one spot, it really has been one of the most effective tools I've used in my career. So, and again, the nice thing is it takes a little bit of clunking around in PowerShell or in .NET or whatever, but you can get some pretty advanced stuff going pretty quickly in DevOps. And don't be afraid of the API, because a lot of it is kind of read-only anyway. You're getting stuff, and then you can call and post. You can do a post call to create a release if you need to or something like that. But it can be pretty powerful to get some of that data back out pretty quickly. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So yeah, we've been that's been very helpful. We're using Azure DevOps. We've been using it for quite a few years now. And it's been amazing how much the functionality has improved over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And one of the features that, or one of the things that we do, so we've got, we've sort of got like a SaaS offering that we do. And so we have a build pipeline. So as our code gets committed, our build pipeline runs, and it runs some unit tests. And if that passes, it gets kicks off a release. So we're not using the multi-stage pipelines yet. We're still using releases.
Right. Sure.
And that'll deploy into our demo environment. And then we just have approvals for our other environments. So we can then trigger it into our other environments. But one of the things that we were looking at doing was whether we could dynamically add those environments to our release. So if we have a new customer that signs up, can we automatically alter the release and add another stage into that release for that new customer?
Right.
And we haven't quite got there yet.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of where we're headed as well, as we continually onboard these new applications from the on-prem. We're definitely feeling the pain of having to go into these same pipelines over and over and over again. So that's why we're trending toward YAML, because in theory, it's just another chunk of code that you've already got. Once you've got, if it works in YAML, then the theory is it's just another chunk of YAML that you can just inject in the right spot, and it should just work. So yeah, we're definitely interested in that as well, trying to get these things as dynamic as possible. So
yeah,
very cool.
I mean, the utopia there is once it's all YAML and assuming you with a couple of different variables on it.
Right. Yeah,
I'm not quite that brave yet.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
We found that the variable groups were very useful.
Yeah.
And tying, because then you can also have a variable group backed by a key vault as well.
Yeah. And that's literally what I was about to mention, was inside of there. So we do the same thing inside of your release. If you're going to edit in here and then jump into your variables up here, you've got your variable groups, and all you need to do is manage your variable groups here for the people that don't know. And when you're doing that, you can back these. So it's a new variable group, and then you can say link your secrets to a specific key vault, and then you just give it a subscription and a key vault name. And then you can use those secrets right inside of your key vault. So, or right inside of your pipelines. That can be super powerful.
I hadn't realized that was one of the options in there. Nice. Yeah.
That one's really nice. And you show that to your security guys, and they're going to do a backflip and give you a hug, which gets weird. But it's they really like secrets, because the other option, if you jump back into your normal, is leave that. And if you jump back into your normal pipeline release, you can click the little secret icon, and that kind of encrypts it, but it encrypts it for you, and others can't recreate that value and stuff like that. But it's It's much better to just, and the beauty of it too is once you've linked it that way, once you bounce this down, it doesn't show you the value here because it's stored in that key vault somewhere. Yeah. But you use these just like you would a normal pipeline variable. So you don't have to redeclare them over here. They just get brought in as a variable group, and then you just $parenthesis name of variable, and it works. So that's really slick.
Jeez, I'm gonna have to start using that.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, and believe me, the place where I'm at now, we've got it's a situation where walking in the door day one, and I've been there now about 4 months. I wanted to do a TFS to Azure DevOps migration like immediately, because they've got some projects that are still in TFS like 2017 still, and a lot of their development's happening there. And it just got to the point where, you know, some of the lift and shift stuff took priority, and I ended up jumping into some of the kind of Azure architecture work first. And it's still in the pipeline, but we had to do some domain work and things like that. But we're in a situation now where on-prem, we're building we're building literally, quote unquote, our artifacts for the build. We're sticking all of that in a NuGet package and putting it in Azure Artifacts and then deploying those artifacts. So we're kind of hopping through. So we're using TFS to build stuff and then shipping it to Azure Artifacts in DevOps, and then from DevOps just deploying the artifact rather than using an actual build system that we could be using. So it's going to get fundamentally easier very quickly here. I'm hoping, if not by the end of the year, early next year, I'm going to be able to do that migration, and then we'll have everybody on the same tool chain, and it's going to be way more effective. But sometimes you just have to do stuff, you know, right?
Yeah.
You're starting your car with a screwdriver, but it works for now. I'm going to fix it. Or whatever the case is. So, yeah. Very cool. Any other questions, you guys? Or stories like that are awesome. I love to hear how people are using the tools. That's really interesting to me as well. Like I said, that definitely scratches the itch of what I did for 3 years. The one thing I've kind of realized, though, is as a consultant, I was able to go in, and it was normally about 2-week engagements where I would go in and I would help people get to Azure DevOps, and I would kind of enable them and tool them up as best I could in 2 weeks to do kind of agile methodologies and Scrum and stuff like that as much as we could in the SOW. And then I kind of leave, and then it might be 6 months to a year, and I would come back and wonder why stuff didn't happen as quickly as I had hoped and things like that. You know how it goes, and where, you know, oh, that guy was really smart. Okay, now back to my everyday, you know, and it's hard to kind of steer a big ship in 2 weeks. So it's been really fun now in my new position to be able to kind of sit in the room day after day and kind of really see the change. So it's been really gratifying and there's been a fundamental shift in the company since we all started to kind of get on the same bandwagon. So it's been fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, you got 7 minutes. What else? No, I really appreciate you guys having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I hope it was beneficial for you guys too.
Yeah, I've got some takeaways.
Good. And like I said, yeah, I'll definitely share. I know that it's only a couple of slides, but I'll share those out and put those additional articles in there that I've.
Awesome.
Like I said, the company that I did work for, one of the things that they really pushed us to do, and I'm glad that they did, was to blog. So there's a bunch of old articles out there, and yes, Azure DevOps does change every 3 weeks, but a lot of it is kind of core stuff that doesn't really change all that much. So there's some good stuff that I've written, and a lot of my compatriots that still are there right all the time. So I'll definitely pump up that blog a little bit. They do some good stuff over there.
Nice.
So, all right, very cool.
Any other questions?
All right.
Are there any other resources to
Sure.
like figure out how to interface directly with the pipelines as well? So what I kind of saw is a lot of interfacing directly with the invoke REST method and doing some of that work. But like, you know, even here, this example of referencing those secrets and stuff like that in code itself. You'd mentioned, oh yeah, you can just, you know, $variable this, but to instantiate those variables and then reference those variables.
Oh yeah. So what I was talking about is like inside of your actual pipeline. So inside of here, inside of those tasks, right? So in here, if you need to use one of those variables, let me get to one where I would actually use it in like build infrastructure. If I'm going to use one of those variables down here, this is what I meant. So dollar parentheses. Yep, that's the reference back to that variable. So like this, and interestingly enough, this VMSS template SAS token is actually generated here. So what we do here is we actually call out to our key vault and we call it to the key vault, get a secret, use that secret in this next script. So we're kind of passing variables up and down the pipeline. Then we use this, we call a PowerShell script that's in our working directory and pass it some arguments. And based on that, it generates a SAS token and provides it back for this one, so that the top one here ends up being kind of dynamic variable that we can use to jump back into our. And the beauty there is that our security team loves that we don't keep SAS tokens long term. So SAS tokens are like the token, kind of like your PAT token. Like it gives you access to your storage account, but we're literally generating them every time we run our pipeline. And as soon as the pipeline's done, we delete the SAS token. So they're that way it's very ephemeral, and we can just grab it and pull it out and use it and then dump it. And that way tokens are not long-lived things in our environment. And our security team really likes that, so that we don't have keys kind of laying on people's desks, essentially. So, yeah, that's one of the big ones. Other than that, I'm trying to think of where else we've done integrations like you're talking about. Yeah, we've done some kind of where even then, you can create your build triggers and stuff so that on check-in they can do gated check-ins, so that you can run like a check-in build and stuff like that to check your build before you actually check the or do the merge, like pull requests, commits, and all that stuff. So that can be pretty effective too. Make sure that even though you've built it locally, make sure that it builds on your build agent before you allow the check-in. You can configure that. That's definitely something that we do at my work, because at times developers sometimes check in code that doesn't work. So did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. So, but anyways, yeah, that's probably the other big one. Artifacts is definitely something that I feel sometimes is underused. If you're licensed for it, definitely use it. We use, like I said, it kind of in a way that it's not really designed for, but it works. Dumping every build that you have into an artifact and then deploying that artifact. I mean, it works, but it's not really what it's for. Yeah. Test plans, if you can get your QA team jumping through test plans. I don't want to get started on QA performance testing, because that's now about to go away, which we screamed at. My former boss, his name is Esteban Garcia. He's a MVP, has been for a long time now. He's a Microsoft regional director. We tried as best we could as a Microsoft Gold partner to sway the product team away from getting rid of performance testing in Azure DevOps. But unfortunately, they said, the statistics say that it's just really not that used. And we're like, yes, but you got to understand that one tester probably they're probably performance testing 100 devs work, right? So you have to multiply, and they're like, anyways. So yeah, there's some interesting frameworks out there. One's called Artillery, and I'm trying to think of what the other one is called, but essentially there's frameworks out there where you can plug it into your pipeline, and what it does is it goes out to PaaS services and spins up a bunch of tiny little containers. So it's basically using like Docker, Kubernetes type containers to spin up and hit your website, and then spin down and then generate those results. So that can be pretty effective for the performance testing if you're trying to slam your service and see how it reacts. We literally just built out our perf lab at work, and we're about to start hammering this thing to see how quickly it falls over. So it's going to be interesting, because I know that's something that some companies struggle to do is performance test their application, and then they wonder why stuff falls over because they haven't right-sized it. So, and that's the 5 a.m. mark my time. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I definitely appreciate you guys having me on.
No, and thank you for getting up in the middle of the night.
Not a problem. I'm normally up at about 5:15 anyway to go to the gym, so this was just an hour earlier. It wasn't too bad. So,
and you at Script Warrior on Twitter?
Yes, I am at Script Warrior on Twitter. Actually, I was going to do this somewhat throwing it out there, but LinkedIn Script Warrior as well. So that's me. That's kind of my picture and stuff. So on all things, I'm kind of Script Warrior. That's kind of my online identity. So yeah, LinkedIn, Twitter, all that stuff. And I try to be as plugged into the community as possible. I live in Clearwater, Florida. I didn't throw that out there earlier. So in the U.S., that's where I'm at. So like I said, Josh reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to do a user group?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, it's 8 o'clock." And I'm like, "Awesome. I can totally do that." And then I realized, wait a second, that's Australian time. That's 4 a.m. But I'm like, hey, you know what? No, this will be good. I used to talk at tons of events, doing all the code camps and IT pro camps that we do over here. And then, life just got so busy. So I definitely want to jump back into that. So I appreciate you guys. It's my kickoff back into the realm of speaking. So I'm glad to be here. So, all right.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jeff.
No problem. Like I said, anybody who wants to reach out, like I said, Twitter's a great way to get a hold of me. Hit me a DM or put it public. That's fine with me too, and I'll answer, or I'll try to direct you into the right channel. So I definitely like to help people out. So thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jeff.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great rest of your meeting. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, Josh, I have to say that every time I see people doing a lot more stuff with Azure DevOps, I'm like, man, you can do a lot of stuff that I need to get up on.
Yeah. So I've got it at the moment. Well, actually, I had it where my scripts were being after passing PS Script Analyzer and some pester tests, I was uploading them to our internal SharePoint site so that other people can get a hold of them. And then that sort of wasn't good enough, so I've finally got around to deploying an internal PowerShell gallery.
How was that?
What's that, sir?
How was that? How was that that addition into creating your own internal NuGet package repository?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm using I think it's Sonatype Nexus, something like that. It's something Nexus. But what it meant, in order to get stuff there without poking a hole in the firewall, is I've deployed a build agent on a local VM, and it's actually working really well. I was pleasantly surprised.
To use a local agent to then reference your internal NuGet package repository?
Yeah. So then I do a round of testing on that local machine, and then can basically publish direct to the gallery.
Okay, now I understand what you're doing. Interesting.
I have to run because kids, but I just wanted to say thank you for organising this, and I found it very helpful. So
Awesome.
This is my first one. I hope to do it again.
Cool. It's good to see you here, Peter.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, folks. Appreciate it. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. See ya.
Cheers. All right, Josh. I'll see you later, man.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Back another day. All right, bye. Thanks, Carl. Cheers.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. See you all later.